Hello and welcome to the second webinar in BALLE's second annual Accelerating Community Capital Series. My name is Alicia and I serve as the Managing Director and Network Services Director at BALLE. We're delighted to have you all with us today. We have about 55 communities signed up to join us from across North America. We're delighted to be continuing our series this year. We originally launched in 2011. These community capital webinars are held the second Tuesday of every month at this time, 10 a.m. Pacific. We co-host this series with RSS Social Finance with advising and input from Slow Money, Portfolio 21 Investments, Finance for Food, and others. I'm going to review a bit of housekeeping, provide a few reminders about this webinar series, and then introduce our topic and our speaker for the day. If you're dialed in by phone but you've not joined us in the webinar room, please find a link in your reminder email from Ali Walker. Because of the number of call participants, we have our phone line muted. So if you have a question for the presenter at any time during the webinar, you can type your question in the public chat window. Daniel may answer a question during his presentation, but we'll hold most questions to the end of the webinar when we have time set aside for moderated Q&A. Likewise, if you have technical difficulties at any point during today's webinar, you can note that in the chat window, and our staff member, Ali Walker, will send you a private chat to help you get things sorted out. The private chat shows up as a new tab to the right of the public chat window in the top right corner of your screen, and that area will flash red once the private chat has been initiated by Ali. After each webinar, we email everyone registered a link to the call audio, the presentation materials, and a copy of the questions in the public chat window. So watch for an email from Ali Walker over the next few days. So our series is explicitly focused on tools you can take home and try out right away. Each month we feature a case study with a community capital innovator, someone who has developed and piloted a working model for connecting local people's investments in businesses and farms to regional needs using regional resources. The innovators present their model each month, and we allow time for dialogue and questions. We suggest you treat these calls as an opportunity to bring together folks in your community, a group of business owners, social entrepreneurs, lenders, philanthropists, and investors in your community who are interested in the topic. After listening to the webinar, you might spend an hour discussing with your group the applicability and relevancy of that model to your community. You won't have to pay extra per attendee on the same webinar line. So we encourage you to use these webinars as a way to get community capital mechanisms moving in your place. And finally, a couple of final reminders. We offer bundled pricing for these webinars. So if you're not already signed up for future webinars, you can register now for March and April and receive a significant discount off the cost of both. Of course, you can also register for each webinar individually if you prefer. Our June through December lineup will be posted in the coming weeks, and our theme for this spring is community-supported enterprises, including a variety of replicable mechanisms for community lending and community ownership of businesses across sectors. Next month, we'll be featuring the owners and founders of Claire's Restaurant in Hardwick, Vermont, who've used several different community-supported enterprise funding mechanisms, including raising startup capital with loans from community members, having another group of community investors invest in the space for their restaurant and their equipment, as well as pre-selling of goods, in this case subscriptions to the future restaurant, which are redeemed at a low monthly rate for 10 months each year for the restaurant's first 4 years. So we'll hear about how the restaurant is doing quite well several years in, why and how they use these community-supported enterprise mechanisms, and how you can replicate them with businesses in your community. So today we are delighted to have Daniel Lau, Program Manager at Mission Assets Fund in San Francisco with us. Daniel manages Lending Circles, which is a nationally recognized and innovative credit building program that has helped hundreds of low-income individuals and recent immigrants build credit histories, improve credit scores, and acquire assets such as homes, small businesses, education, citizenship. He serves as the trainer, facilitator, and manager in expansion of the Lending Circles model through community partners across the Bay Area and beyond. So some of you may be familiar with Lending Circles in the capacity of helping individuals access capital for their personal needs. And we're going to explore today how Lending Circles can also help small businesses and aspiring business owners access capital through their community members. So Daniel's going to walk us through how they set up, guide, and support lending circles, the results this has created for participants and businesses, and how you can create and support similar lending circles in your community so that part of your community capital strategy is really about making sure that everyone who wants to start a business and to serve your community through the business sector has access to capital. So with that, Daniel, I am going to turn over the floor to you to pull up your slides here. And before you get started, once you've got your slides up, give me a second and I'll cue everybody about how to come back into the webinar room.
Sure. Thank you.
So Daniel has pulled up a screen share. He's going to pull up his slides here. We'll all see him do that. And in that screen share, we've now all been taken to a full screen mode, which means you can't see the chat window or answer or ask questions. So if everybody will roll their mouse up to the top of their screen, you'll see a little toolbar that will pull down, and you want to click on the Exit Full Screen button, which is somewhere in the middle of that toolbar. So again, mouse up to the top of your screen, click on that Exit Full Screen button, and you'll be able to see both Daniel's presentation and the chat window should you have any questions as we go along. So Daniel, I have now completed that process, so I think you should be safe to take us away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Allison and Ali, for inviting Mission Asset Fund to give this presentation and talk about this exciting opportunity that we have here, the Lending Circles program. So good morning, everyone from San Francisco. Again, my name is Daniel Lau, Program Manager with Mission Asset Fund, and I'll be doing a presentation on the Lending Circles program and implications for small business replication and building community capital. So here you can see on the title slide, kind of our tagline is, the Lending Circles program is a culturally relevant and responsible credit building loan program. So moving on to the next slide. Just a quick agenda, just to let everyone know the topics that we'll be talking about. So a short introduction to MAF, who we are and how we got started. What are lending circles? How does it work? We have some current partnerships that are already in place, so I'll go over what the structure of those look like. And then definitely have some time at the end for questions and brainstorming and talking about next steps. All right, so just to jump right in, a little history about MAF. We are a San Francisco-based nonprofit that was established in 2007. We're based here in the Mission District of San Francisco, which is this really diverse and vibrant community, historically known as an immigrant gateway. There's a strong Latino population that comes from different Latin American countries from all over the world. And the way we got started was from a startup grant from the Levi Strauss Foundation, which was also based here in the Mission, and they closed in 2007. They had a factory here in the Mission, and when they closed, you know, a lot of the workers and a lot of the community was impacted by the closing of that factory. And so what they wanted to do with an endowment and with this grant was to start an organization that would reinvest funding and resources into the community, and specifically based on investment and asset development models, because that was something that was found lacking in the community. And so from that, our executive director, Jose Quinones, was brought on board, and Mission Asset Fund was born. About a year later, in 2008, we began the Lending Circles program here in the Mission District. And the name that the Lending Circles program goes by here in the Mission is Cestas Populares, which translates to popular baskets in English. And we'll go into more detail about how that actually works, but that's how the program got started. And then just last year, we were able to expand the Lending Circles program outside of the Mission District. We started with the Bay Area and then moved down to Southern California. Now we're in Nevada and Massachusetts, and very soon, you know, in this next month, we'll be launching our new replication project in the Northwest region, so Washington, Oregon, Montana, et cetera. So we're very excited to see this trajectory of growth over the last few years. Okay, so what is peer lending? Very simply, it's just a group of people who get together and to lend and borrow money from each other. So you can see from this visual, the money, the capital, the resources are coming from individuals. So this is financial activity that takes place out of our traditional formal financial institution. So it's not happening in a bank. It's not happening in a credit union. This is money coming from people and being distributed and rotated through to other people. What's really fascinating is that it's a multicultural kind of global phenomenon. So when we first got started to do this work, we realized that many people were familiar with this concept, and it takes place throughout the entire world. It goes by different names. It has different variations, but we've really found that there is some form of peer lending that happens all over the world. And so these are some of the larger countries and the names that we've been able to find for the peer lending activity that takes place, but it's really a global phenomenon that many people are familiar with, but not here in the U.S. So what is our Lending Circles program, and how does it build off of that peer lending model? So the underlying philosophy of Mission Asset Fund and kind of our founding principles and the foundation that we built this program off of is we meet people where they are and we build on what they have. And what we mean by that is that, so when we found that this informal lending activity took place among so many people, specifically immigrant populations, and then we're also very aware and cognizant of the credit building and financial issues that take place in low-income and recent immigrant communities, that they didn't have access to credit, or they didn't even have a bank account and were unbanked or underbanked, and using what we call fringe finance providers, payday lenders, check cashers, pawn shops, and so forth. We started to think and brainstorm about that and say, why is this informal lending activity not recognized and not acknowledged by mainstream financial institutions? Because the activity that takes place among these populations is legitimate. They're demonstrating positive financial behavior. They're making payments to one another. They're lending and borrowing money to each other, and that's legitimate financial behavior. So that's really the founding principles of how we developed this program and why we feel so strongly and passionate about being that bridge to the financial mainstream. So at the heart of it, the Lending Circles program is a zero-fee, zero-interest credit-building loan program for low-income individuals. So by this point, most people are like, okay, Daniel, you told me so much about it, but how does it actually work? How does your Lending Circles program work? So here we can see on this slide 3 easy steps. So in step 1, we kind of coordinate and hold a meeting so that the group of people who wants to join a lending circle, they come together and they'll decide the amount of money that they want to put in and the order that they will each receive. So in this example, you see that there are 5 people. They've decided among themselves that they're all going to put in $100 into the lending circle each month, and that the order, they've predetermined this order with A, B, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's step 1. Step 2 is when the money is actually taken from their accounts to create that pot, that basket. So here in this example, we have a basket of $500 that was created from the $100 contributions of each person. And since person A is first, they're going to get the $500 first. Step 3, so all of our payments are completed online. These are all electronic online ACH transactions. So when that $100 is taken, it's a debit from your checking account, and then when it's your turn, the $500 will be credited back into your checking account if it's your turn. And then all of the payment history is recorded and then reported to 2 major credit bureaus. So we report to Experian and TransUnion. And so to complete the cycle, to complete the program, what will happen next is the following month, again, everybody's account will be debited $100, and now person B will get the $500 since it's their turn that month, and so forth until person E gets their $500, and then the lending circle will close. So at the end of the program, everyone will have put in $500, everyone will have received $500, and everyone's credit score will have increased because they've made 5 on-time monthly payments. I also wanted to share this visual It's this beautiful graphic that a consultant of ours developed, which really kind of has this beautiful diagram of where we see ourselves in the role of the financial mainstream and bridging financial resources and financial capability with our clients. So if you look on the lower left side, that image is to represent the informal lending activity that we found takes place in many immigrant and low-income communities that was previously going unrecognized. And then there's a bridge. MAF is the bridge that connects that informal lending activity to the formal financial mainstream. And through the upper cycle is our Lending Circles program. And so you see it's called CESTA because we designed this when we were only working in the mission. But each client will sign a promissory note with us through the program so that they've taken out a formal loan based on the amount that they've decided. The bank services the loan. We then report those payments to credit bureaus, and the credit bureaus generate credit reports with that payment history for each client. And so that leads to results, meaning that now these formerly unrecognized clients are now recognized and acknowledged in the financial mainstream. You know, their payment activities have been recorded. They've demonstrated financial responsibility, and it generates a larger customer base and client base for banks, for credit unions. And so we've really found that this has developed. This has larger economic implications in terms of developing a stronger client base for these financial institutions and the financial capability and awareness of our clients. Many of them did not understand credit, did not understand banking, didn't have a checking account or savings account before investment. So we've really seen very, very large implications and scalability for this type of work to be able to generate kind of economic recovery and economic mobility through our communities. And so we're very excited to share some of these results now that we've operated the program for several years. At this point, we have given out 607 loans, or written out 607 loans. We've reached $900,000 in loan volume. So we're really close to that $1 million number, and we'll definitely reach it this year. And we're very excited. It's a huge milestone for us in the development and expansion of this program. We've had a 0% default rate, which we are always so proud to share. All of the clients who have come through our doors have successfully completed the program. No one has fallen behind in their payments. There have been exceptions where we need to work on a more individual basis with some clients, but no one has defaulted and no one has been unable to repay the loan that they took out. And then we've seen a 30-point average credit score increase across the board for our clients. So those are really, really exciting and inspiring numbers that we're really proud to share. And you can see in the picture there, we have a client who was so happy with her credit score, and we did a little photo shoot and photo campaign where we asked people to kind of share their excitement with us with their new improved credit score. And so you see she has a wonderful credit score of 728. So what I also wanted to touch on was some more kind of in-depth examples of some clients who have come through our doors and the small business implications that we've seen. So I'm going to highlight Jessica. Jessica was a client of ours who came from Peru in early 2008. And so you see when she first came to our office in November, she had no assets, she had no credit score, and no checking account. We worked with her for the first few months. We got her enrolled in some of our financial education courses, and then once we helped her get that checking account, she joined her first lending circle with a loan of $800 in March. We helped her apply for a credit card through our local credit union, and then in September, when we pulled her credit score for the first time, we found that she went from 0 to 623. And I wasn't the one directly in contact with her, but when our client services manager contacted her to let her know, she told us that Jessica started crying over the phone because for so long she trying to get a loan from the bank. She had aspirations to start a small business, a house cleaning business, to get herself started and to support herself and her family, but she wasn't able to access those resources because she didn't have a credit score. So when she heard the news, she was overjoyed. She continued to do another lending circle with us. got a formal loan from the bank to buy a car for her business because she was seeing so much demand and activity with her business that she needed a car to get around to the different houses that she was serving. And then finally joined a third lending circle in 2010. And so the last 2 times that we pulled her credit, it has increased again from 703 and then finally to 724 in June of 2011. And last I've heard from Jessica, her business has expanded so much that she had to hire 2 full-time employees to help her manage all of the demand and the client base that she has now. I just wanted to highlight that because I think it has larger implications for job creation and kind of economic stimulus, and it all kind of ties together with our program and providing access to those opportunities and resources. Another story I want to highlight is Alicia. So Alicia is a food business owner, and I wonder if anyone here from San Francisco is familiar with her because she recently, she has a huge following here in the Bay Area, and she recently opened up a little storefront in Justin Herman Plaza down in the Embarcadero in downtown San Francisco, which is in a wonderful location. She tells us that she runs out of tamales all of the time, every day, because there's just so much business. But she came to us as well, looking for capital, looking for resources to be able to support her business, to buy her inventory and food truck and supplies. And we were happy to help her. She demonstrated strong financial motivation in getting her business started and up and running. And so we were happy to support her and see her progress so far through the program. And the tagline for her business is, "My tamales are stuffed with love, and the best people are stuffed with my tamales." I love that quote, and I think it really captures her passion, her drive, and how we're able to support her in achieving that mission. So now I want to spend a little time talking about partnerships, because we do have current partnerships now with Bay Area and other national organizations to offer and implement the Lending Circles program in their local communities. So this chart kind of breaks down the roles and responsibilities of each party. On the left side, you'll see the Lending Circles partners. Their responsibility is for outreach and recruitment, screening and enrollment, facilitating and hosting those group formation sessions, managing client data, and then providing ongoing client services throughout the duration of the program. So what we say is that's kind of the front end direct client service work. That is always the responsibility and the management of the partner. Mission Asset Fund, what we do is all the back end servicing and behind the scenes work, where we do everything we need to do to make sure that things run smoothly and that you can do your best job of serving your clients and getting them enrolled into the program. So we'll provide all of the materials, training, and technical assistance to get started, all the tools and resources that you'll need to implement the program. So actually, this PowerPoint is a great example of that. This is something that we would offer as a package to our partners, so that this is a presentation that you could use to explain the program to potential clients, to let them know how it works and answer any questions they have. And then we also have flyers and the promissory notes and other documents that you would need. We extend the license to our client database, and we use Salesforce. I'm a huge fan of Salesforce. Have a little techie side to me, and I think that all the little functionalities of Salesforce are just wonderful and very user-friendly. And then we manage all the loan servicing and monitoring, so all the payment processing, the debits and the credits each month. We manage all of that here on the back end. The credit reporting as well to TransUnion and Experian. And then we also, through Salesforce, again, we can do real-time reporting, which is really cool. So I can pull down different data points and different metrics for Lending Circles and clients to keep partners updated on their progress and kind of financial outcomes as they go through the program. Here's a map that shows where our current partnerships are. We have 11 current, and we have 5 more expected, again, in the Northwest. So definitely there's a cluster here in the Bay Area and in San Francisco. And then as I mentioned before, we're also offering the program in Los Angeles, in Nevada, in Reno, and then in Boston, Massachusetts. So to wrap up and kind of give some summary on the presentation, so lessons learned that we've picked up along the way working with partners, definitely ideal or kind of selection criteria is partners who have a strong relationship and standing within the community. Because this is such a community-based program where it's people coming together and loaning and borrowing money to each other, we find that the organization really has to have a strong relationship with its clients. Whenever we're dealing with people and their money, they're not necessarily going to give that up so easily, and developing that sense of trust is a process. And so we find that partners who have that trust established, it's a much easier fit, and it just makes more sense for the program based on our values and principles. Definitely having some experience managing groups because the lending circles can range from between 4 and 12 members, so having some experience facilitating and managing group sessions. Organizations that have a finance or education or asset development kind of feel to them, whether they offer those programs or are familiar with similar type programs. Clients will come because they're interested in providing for themselves and their families and developing their financial capability. And so we find that it's an easier fit when organizations can also provide other resources or kind of complement the Lending Circles program with other opportunities to provide financial education or business incubation, business development programs. And then because we are expanding, it's nice if the organization has experience using online communication tools such as Skype and GoToMeeting, which I'm assuming all of you do since you're here on this webinar. And then besides the data and numeric results, I think the other impact highlights I wanted to focus on is we've seen through the program that we've been able to support local businesses and economies, kind of touching back to Jessica and Alicia's stories. Our program isn't focused on clients who have small businesses, because we have other people who will come who are saving for a long-term goal, whether it's to go back to school or because we're in a predominantly Latino population, we have a lot of mothers who come who want to save for their daughter's quinceañera, their 15th birthday party. Other people who are kind of swimming in debt and just want to make a big payment towards their credit card. So we're not exclusive to supporting small businesses, but we have found that many people come to us with those goals in mind, and we've kind of followed and tracked some of those stories and have found very successful business plans, and they've been able to hire people, so there's job creation and economic stimulus and keeping money local, which has a larger return on their investment. The social capital aspect. So bringing these people together in a room that have similar goals turns into this beautiful dynamic of community building and social capital. So I've seen numerous examples of people who didn't know each other before the Lending Circles program, but built relationships and built informal partnerships through getting to know one another. I'm specifically thinking of two women where in a group formation session that I sat in on, where one was a business owner. She was starting a fruit and vegetable kind of corner store, and then another woman who was a free market designer and graphic artist. And so they were talking and they were thinking about how they could work together to strategize to advertise for the store and for that store owner to be a client to this freelance designer. So again, strengthening that community bond and building that social capital. And the last thing is that we've really enhanced the movement for responsible lending practices. A lot of times people will come to us because they couldn't get a loan, because they couldn't build their credit. And so there's definitely discussions about why certain policies are in place that have limited their ability to access those resources. Why are lending policies the way they are? What is credit? How is credit determined? Those kind of things, interest rates, and what is the underwriting process for giving out loans. So definitely discussions about how these policies have been made, how they're enforced, and what we can do to capture and develop more responsible lending practices. So that's the end of my presentation, and I think what I would love to hear some questions on, I hope there are some, is what are the implications of this work and this model for small business or for BALLE's networks and communities. I'd love to hear some thoughts and brainstorms about how this model could be replicated and brought to different communities, and perhaps tailored differently, because we do focus on the low income and underbanked population, but the model itself has shown to be very flexible and easy to adapt, because what I forgot to mention is that we've chosen a very diverse set of partners to pilot how this program can work in different places. And so here in San Francisco, we've partnered with an LGBT population in the Castro, with the Chinatown population, with the Asian Pacific Islander population in Chinatown. And we've seen very, very successful results, that this program is something that is familiar to a lot of people. It takes some startup. It does take some new branding and new messaging, but definitely the model works, and we have the infrastructure to adapt it and to bring it to different places. So thank you for your attention, and I think we'll get to the questions.
All right. So Daniel, I've ended your screen share, and I've pulled back up your version of the presentation that's got the funky, weird squares at the top, but everybody will at least be able to see your contact information as we start running through the many questions that folks have already served up. So let's go back to basics with our first question. So in the example of the kind of $500 pot that you mentioned, where everybody gets $500 in 1 month, but then in other months they're giving $100 to the other folks in the circle, we had a question. So are basically people just using their $500 to then pay somebody else $500? Are they just swapping money around? How do people use the funds? So could you explain that a bit further? What's the value in getting that chunk of funds when you're also giving a smaller amount to your, to the folks in the circle in other months?
Right. It works out really organically or naturally with each group. So if you request one of the first numbers, you are receiving a loan in the traditional sense. So if I was person A, I put in $100, but I received $500. So I received a loan of $400 through the program. And so we'll see that those people who request the numbers first, they're trying to pay down debt. They're trying to make pay down something for this really high interest rate, or they just need something. They need something immediate. They need that cash or that income flow for something immediate. And what we do is we encourage each person to explain to the group what their reason is and what they like to do with the money, because we feel that they have a right. Everybody has a right to know, because it's their money that they're putting in. So people who request the money first usually have a more immediate need. Others who take the last numbers have a savings goal, usually it's a savings goal, or they think of it as an automatic savings program because the money is taken from your account automatically each month.
Great, thank you. So part of this is that rather than just trying to save the money themselves over a couple of months, they can get an infusion all at one time and then kind of amortize out their contributions to others, but they're also creating a credit score and some financial activity on the books, as it were, that the mainstream financial system recognizes in the process. Exactly. All right. Well, and so we have a number of questions about kind of how this works financially for the members and for Mission Assets Fund, how the kind of group dynamics works, how people find you, some of their profiling, how the partnership works, and then some regulations questions. So there's some new questions coming in, but I'm going to kind of serve them up in those big buckets. So one of the questions we got is about, you showed that beautiful graphic from a graphic recorder, and you mentioned the bank that you work with that helps service the loan. So who are the banks that are helping service the loan, and how does that connect back with the individual lenders? Since you talked about how, for the most part, this is just individual community members loaning to each other. So what's that bank connection?
Right. So Citibank is the bank that we use to service all the Lending Circle loans, and then we do have many partnerships with banks and credit unions here in the Bay Area. So when clients come through our doors, we're able to refer them right away to different banks to get a checking account, which is usually the first step. And so it is, in a larger big picture sense, it is almost a client customer development program for these big banks and credit unions. And that's how we do a lot of our presentations, and that's how we develop partnerships with them, because it's, this is a population that you normally wouldn't have access to, or they don't have the right financial standing or credit history to be able to bank with you yet. But we see ourselves as an intermediary and a kind of client development program that opens up a lot of doors afterwards, and then provides a healthy, responsible relationship to banks, which a lot of banks are in favor for now with the current political climate.
And so part of what you're doing is in you establishing a relationship and meeting with people where they're at with the Lending Circle model, then you're also just acting as a bridge for them to set up separate accounts unrelated to the Lending Circle with those financial institutions. But is there a specific connection back to the Lending Circle in any piece of the, basically when you talked about the ACH debiting, so in order to do the Lending Circle, you're working through the bank where everybody's setting up an account. It's automatically getting either debited or credited, and that's the bank that's the bank connection. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the bank connection. So that's a service
Great.
that they provide for us. Yeah.
Great, and I'm sure that we'll have folks in this community who will tell you over time, if you can, move that work into a locally owned or regionally owned bank, they could give you lots of reasons to do that. But great that Citibank is providing that service for you as well. We had another question about the 0% interest, several in fact. And how that works and the zero fees. So first, how does this work financially for Mission Assets Fund? So if there's a zero fee, there's 0% interest, how do you maintain the financial sustainability of the program for yourselves as an organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are grant funded, and we do fundraise and receive funding from foundations and different grant making organizations to subsidize the cost of the program. Because so for clients, the participation in the program is completely free. So there's no fees, no charges, no interest. But for us as an organization, we do have to grant and fundraise to be able to sustain the program.
And so as part of this is that you have a capacity building mission as an organization, and so you work to raise funds because your goal is to be able to provide this service with no barriers, say from a fee or interest. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. And what I should also share is that through the expansion, there is a licensing fee that we would charge partners, and so that has been a source of revenue for us to be able to sustain our operations. So we do have some earned income, revenue generating sources, but for the most part we are grant funded.
And are you aware of models like this where part of this sustainable financing for the organization that's helping create the Lending Circle is that they do charge fees or interest? Is that something you explored? Can you talk about that a little bit?
So can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yeah, so are you aware of others that are doing Lending Circles but that are charging fees or interest as a way of financing themselves, say, outside of grant funding?
Yeah, there are some groups who are doing peer lending that do charge, but I think our program is really unique in the community building and social capital aspect of it. So I think there is an organization called Lending Club or Money Tree that does peer-to-peer lending as well in a group context, and so you would sign up on their website and find other people to lend to you. but there is a fee, and then there is a service charge, a percentage of the loan transaction that's charged with each payment. And to my knowledge, they don't really emphasize that these people get to know one another or meet each other and kind of share their goals or what their reason is for taking out the loan. So so we are aware of different models that charge fees, but I think it would be really difficult for us to compare our models because I think they are very different.
Got it. You just are driven by different drivers.
Yeah.
Great. Well, and so continuing on understanding this relationship with the bank, does the bank charge fees to Mission Asset Fund for managing the accounts? And if so, how does that fee get paid?
Right. Yeah, we are charged a fee for processing the payments each month, and that's paid for by and large from grants and foundations, from grant money. Great.
And you mentioned that at this point you've had 607 loans. Does that mean you've also had 607 participants? So how does that number map back to the number of folks you've worked with? And related to that, what's the average size of a lending circle, and what have you found as an optimal size for a lending circle?
Yeah, great question. So the average size and the average loan amount, the average size is about 8 to 10 people. And the reason that plays out is because usually more than 10, 12 people, we encourage maybe to separate into two groups instead of forming one big one, because that means however many over 10 or 12 means that those people will have to wait more than a year or close to a year to get their payout, which is a long time to ask people to do. And once we explain that to them, they're like, oh, yeah, I don't want to wait more than a year to get my money. And then we don't recommend having less than 6 people because for credit score and credit improvement purposes, to have that impact, you want at least 6 months of credit history. So although the minimum is 4, what we can do if there's 4 people is that we can say that lending circle can go around for another cycle, meaning that each person receives 2 payouts, and that the loan term in length is 8 months instead of 4 months. So they'll have that credit history, 8 months of credit history rather than 4. The average size of the loan we found is about $1,500. So the different contribution amounts, the smallest that we've seen is $50 a month, and the most that we've seen is $200 a month. So give or take that, and averaging with the 8 to 10 people, the average loan size is about $1,500 per person. And I'm sorry, Allison, I know that there was a question in the beginning. I may have skipped over that.
Yes, the 607 loans that you've completed thus far means 607 participants.
Oh, not necessarily. So like the example with Jessica, she took out a total of 3 loans with us. So she's still the same client, but she took out 3. So I would say that 607 number maybe goes down to 575, maybe 550 for the actual number of clients that we've served.
Great, thank you. And in terms of who you're serving, somebody had said, do you have kind of statistics and other background information about the folks that you're serving? Is there any kind of patterns in terms of their employment or their education? Or you talked about how many may be immigrants and coming from places where this is a more culturally familiar way to access capital. But is there anything else that you can share about trends you've seen in the folks that you're serving with your circles?
Yeah. So I can share some data and kind of demographics with our population here in the Mission, but because we've only recently expanded in the last year, we don't have too much data with our partner populations. But here in the Mission, predominantly Latino, predominantly immigrants within the last 5 to 10 years, and a stronger proportion of women. I think it's almost a 75% to 25% ratio women to men, and I think that's something that always struck me as this phenomenon, that maybe there's a stronger sense of community or I don't know, that social kind of togetherness among women or trust. And then also there's, I think about 25 to 30% are self-employed. So many people are trying to start their own businesses. Many people come to this country with a skill or with a trade or something that they want to continue doing here in the U.S., and so they want to start their own business here. And many are low income. Many have didn't finish high school or didn't go to college. And I think I'm remembering a research report that we put out recently that the average age was a Latina woman in her 40s. I think that's our average client is a Latina woman in her 40s.
Great, thank you. I think that's helpful given how much of this is how much of a mission focus you have here beyond just kind of financial gain as an institution to know the communities that you are serving. So on the 0% interest, the other piece of that question we received is that a problem from an IRS perspective? Is that familiar? Is that something you've explored at all?
Is it a problem in terms of filing our taxes, filing our...
Jenny, that was a question from our colleague Jenny Casson, if she wanted to chime in there to expand further. We'll see if she pops an additional response there in the public chat window. So while we're waiting, the issue is that the IRS imputes interest on the 0% loan.
No, not to my knowledge. I'm not as involved with the billing and accounting of our organization, but I know that we kind of escape a lot of challenges and difficulties because we don't charge interest, so that there isn't any financial gain on our part, and there isn't any financial gain from the client's perspective. So we don't have to report any income or any kind of revenue generation. So.
And are you aware whether the lenders themselves would have to pay tax on imputed interest?
No, I don't believe that they have to pay tax
Great.
on their loan.
Great. All right. Thanks, Jenny. She's giving us the thumbs up. So working through technology there for our follow-up questions. That's great. So we had a couple of folks say, what happens when one member of a circle pays late or doesn't pay? Would that affect the credit of others? What recourse would the participants have if a person defaults? How can you make sure a person doesn't take their $500 that month and abscond and not go ahead and contribute to the rest of the group? I know you've had a 0% default, so I imagine you have some mechanisms in place for making sure all of that goes well. So can you speak a little bit further about what those mechanisms are for helping make sure that people pay and they don't pay late and that they pay at all?
Yeah, definitely. That's always the number one question we get from clients, because either they themselves or someone that they know has heard about this program, participated in a similar lending circle type program, and has had a bad experience where someone did walk away with the money, couldn't find them afterwards, and couldn't get payments from them for the next month. Mission Asset Fund, as the nonprofit organization, we guarantee all of the loans. So we serve as a guarantor in all the loans that we give out. And so what that means is no matter what happens to other individuals in your lending circle, your loan will always be guaranteed. There is a late fee that's associated with not making your payments on time. So if we were to debit your account and we received a bounce back from the bank saying that there were non-sufficient funds, we'll contact that client, figure out what the individual situation is, and then work with them to get that payment back into our records. But the next time we do debit their account, there is a late fee. But what's important is that in the interim of that process of however long of a time we need to work with that client to get the money, we will put in our own money to pay to make sure that whoever's turn it is, they receive the full amount of their loan. And that's our role as the guarantor. And in no way is any of the credit impacted of the participants. So with that one client who who didn't make their payment on time, we do have a 30-day grace period to be able to work with that client to get their payment in on time, and then we can report it as paid. It's not late, it's not defaulted, so we just have a 30-day window to work with them. And so what we mean by that 0% default is that we've been able to settle everyone's account and work with them to get the payment in on time before that 30-day window expires. But in the meantime, we back up the funds and we say, even if we haven't received that $100 payment or whatever payment it is, we're still going to get your full amount of the loan because we'll put in the money in the meantime.
So that means that as the organization facilitating these financial activities, you need to have some cash flow yourself. You need to have some liquidity in case, for example, you're needing to step in a particular group on a particular month as a guarantor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have an account that we designate as our loan loss reserve fund. So there's always kind of a pool of money that we can tap into to ensure that everyone gets their loan, the full amount of their loan.
And I would imagine, since you're working with, for the most part, smaller size loans, but that are just high leverage, high impact, then that helps keep that financially sustainable for you guys as well, in terms of the amount that you need to have in that loan loss reserve fund.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Well, so you had mentioned also at one point that you do a promissory note, and somebody had said, could you remind me how the loans are documented? Do you have a promissory note or a loan agreement? So could you describe that process again?
Sure. So what we do here at MAF is when a group is ready to form their lending circle, we host a 2-hour meeting to bring those people in together to meet one another and kind of have that face-to-face opportunity. So in the first hour of that meeting is when we'll do this exact type presentation where we kind of make sure that everyone understands the program, people have an opportunity to ask questions, really understand how the logistics and the mechanics of the program work. And then we break for dinner and we provide a meal so that everyone can talk and socialize and get to know one another. And that's when we ask people to talk about their goals, why they're joining this program, how they heard about us, etc. In the second hour is when we do the actual group formation and the signing of the legal documents and the promissory note. So in the previous slide about the contribution amount and the distribution order, that's all decided in that meeting. And I want to emphasize that is group driven. So our role as MAF and what we train partners on is that our role is a facilitator, meaning that we never pass judgment or we never say you should go first, you shouldn't go first. Everything needs to be group driven because it is their money, and we really stand behind that they are in total control of their money because it's their money that's going into the circle and they're lending and borrowing to each other. And we found that is what builds that social bond and that social capital and that sense of investment because they know that they've decided everything for themselves. This is their lending circle with their goals in mind. And a big part, I think that's why we've seen a 0% default rate because they feel committed, they feel invested in this program, in this commitment they've made to each other. But during that process, once all of those decisions are made is when we pass out the legal documents for them to complete. And so what is in that document is the loan amount, which is decided on how much money and how many people, the loan term, so what's the first payment date, what's the last payment date, and then they as the borrower sign, Mission Asset Fund as the guarantor signs, and then in the case of a partner, the partner will also sign as the originator of the loan.
Great. Thank you. It's really helpful to have you go into some more detail about how that works and how it's actually a really important piece of the success of your model. So it sounds like as part of that process, groups may be establishing some of their own criteria for how the group works. So somebody had asked a question about do they have use criteria or lending criteria. Have you seen any groups that have really walked down that path in any kind of substantial way? Hey, this is how we want everybody to be using this. or is it really just up to, are they really setting the bounds of how much they're going to give, how that works, but it's really up to each individual person to figure out how they use it?
Yeah, it's really up to each individual person, but we do have another program that is specifically based for citizenship. So we have another Lending Circle program where people are specifically saving for their citizenship application fee. And so we've seen really great success with that as well, because there is a focused, motivated goal, and it really brings people together around that purpose. Because citizenship is such a difficult, and you have to jump through so many hoops to get through your application and all of the qualifications. So we found that something like that, people really kind of bond together over, and they motivate one another by saving financially for it. They're more motivated to get their paperwork together, to get all the documents they need to submit their application. So giving this presentation is in a very interesting place for us, because we've just started to do that program, and we've seen such great success and drive behind that we're really toying with the idea of maybe developing lending circles with more specific purposes to be able to support support individuals in a more focused way. Because right now, the lending circles, the money can be used for anything, and we don't really place any criteria or specific purpose on clients to spend the money in any kind of way. It's more about the credit building, financial education, community building model. But we're intrigued by more specific purpose-driven lending circles.
I would imagine that in a lot of the Slow Money chapters and BALLE networks and other groups who come and participate in our Accelerating Community Capital series, that they could make great use of a model like this, but with some kind of specific lending criteria, things around small business startup or small business expansion, or any number of other things. So that's interesting to hear that you're starting to consider that direction as well. So we've had a number of additional great questions come in here, and there's a couple more we hadn't gotten to yet, so I think we won't quite make it through all of the questions. I'm going to serve one more up to you and then do a couple closing reminders. But Daniel, if people wanted to access you for any questions about how the partnership program works, or anything else about your model we didn't get to today, is that all right to contact you at the information you've provided here on the slide?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to hear from folks and get some more feedback and do some more brainstorming about how we can enhance and continue to replicate and scale the model.
That's wonderful. So I think, let's see here, so many great questions. Maybe we were just talking about the promissory note. So just to be very clear, who is the counterparty to the loan agreement or promissory note?
I'm not familiar. Counterparty meaning, so as the guarantor, we back up the loan. So we sign each promissory note as the guarantor of those loans, so that in the case that someone isn't making their payments on time, or in the eventual case that we do have a default, Mission Asset Fund will always step up to back up that loan and to provide the funds to each person. So we are to the credit bureaus and to other financial institutions, we are the lender, but in actuality, the people are lending to each other. But to formalize the system and to put pressure on the system to pay attention to this informing lending activity, we had to put ourselves as the lender, counterparty, guarantor.
Got it. So in practice, the group members are really lending the money to each other. There's no Mission Asset funds in that process. But in order to be a guarantor for the loans and to kind of help have this build the bridges to the traditional financial institutions, then in terms of that kind of legal paperwork, then you do show up as the lender.
Yep, that's right.
Great. That's helpful to understand. Well, so I really appreciate all of the terrific questions that we've had from all of our participants today, and Daniel, really appreciate you sharing your time and experience with lending circles at Mission Assets Fund this way. So I encourage everybody, if there were any questions that you didn't get answered and you want to follow up about how to replicate this in your community, to contact Daniel. And then as we noted at the top of the call, we always share our call materials within a couple of days after each webinar so that you can continue using them for viewing parties with others in your community or partners who couldn't join you. So we share the recording of the live webinar, an integrated recording. We share the PDF copy of the presentation materials, and then we also include a copy of the chat window. So you can see both the questions that went back and forth and some of the comments and additional resources that call participants have shared with each other. So again, we are excited to have many of you join us next month as we continue exploring community-supported enterprise financing mechanisms, and we hope to have as many of you as possible join us in person at our day-long Accelerating Community Capital Workshop on May 16th in Grand Rapids, and of course at our BALLE Annual Business Conference, where we have a dedicated track to continuing to go deeper in these community capital mechanisms. So you can find out more about all of that on our website, livingeconomies.org. And again, thanks to everybody for their time, and thanks very much, Daniel, for a terrific presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much. Take care. Have a good day, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day.
Same. Thank you. Take care, everyone.